Hi, my name is Carrie Toth, and I would like to welcome you to episode 2 of ICTFL, the Illinois Council on Teaching a Foreign Language, 10-minute teaching tips video series. We're so glad to have you join us today, and we'd like to share with you our second of our tip series, and this is going to be on accessing prior knowledge. I know you've all been there with your language students. In level 1, they learn a certain group of words and they hear them a lot of times. And so by the time they get to levels 2 and 3 and 4, we find that they're very reliant on the words that they learned earlier in their language career. And what we know as teachers is that in order to become intermediates, good, strong intermediates, our students need to have a broader vocabulary. They need to make different choices when it comes to the verbs that they use, or even the nouns and adjectives that they use to describe things. And so how do we tackle this concern? How do we go about changing the vocabulary that our students have? I'd like to offer you a suggestion from my classroom. What you see in front of you are my students with a giant Post-it note. Now, giant Post-it notes aren't always cheap. I actually got these on sale for $2. So if you don't have access to giant Post-it notes at a reasonable price, if you go to your local newspaper, a lot of times they will have what's called an end roll. The end roll is the part of the newspaper that they cannot use to print. And so they are able to share that with you, and it becomes like butcher paper in your classroom. So if you're using that butcher paper, then your students have a cheap, free way. Also, in our library, the librarian buys large rolls of bulletin board paper, although that's a little more expensive. And worst case scenario, tape 4 pieces of plain white printer paper together, and you have yourself a little poster. So what I like to do at the start of a unit, and I'm going to give you some examples of the units that I would do this in. At the start of that unit, I like to get rid of all of the level 1 vocabulary. What you see here are my students working on a unit about biodiversity and conservation. We were really going to dig deep in the differences in what you can find in the forest in our community versus what you could find in the jungle in Panama. The differences in the water. We have a reservoir in our community, and in Panama they have the Panama Canal, and the things that live there and the problems that the Panama Canal has with keeping silt out of the water versus anything that might be a concern for our city as they try and care for the reservoir. So I didn't want them to keep resorting back to level 1 vocabulary, and so I needed a way to pull that vocabulary out of them. So I gave them, in groups of 4, a Post-it note, and each student got 1 color marker. They were then to make a poster that represented everything that they knew about any plants, about any animal, about any landform, about any water feature that they might know from our English language from our last year's studies, and they put them down on that paper and we hung them around the room. With all of these displayed, my students did a gallery walk, and so they had the opportunity to see what words other students remembered as well, but the best part was those words then became off limits for the rest of the unit. In order to increase their vocabulary, now they can't go back to saying animal, plant, tree. Now they have to say different words for all of those things. So one of the trees that they learned about from Panama was a mangrove. They had to use words like mangrove. They had to learn about all the layers of the forest and use the vocabulary for those layers. They learned about forest animals. So instead of saying just small animals, they were able to say squirrels in our forest and deer. And then in Panama, they talked about sloths and monkeys and different tropical birds. It was a lot of fun for me to see them move past the old vocabulary that they had always used. Another unit that I like to do this in is an identity unit that we also do in level 3 Spanish. We get ready to read a reader about a boy who is a Mexican American, and he's going into his Mexican-American neighborhood where he grew up, and he's trying to solve kind of a mystery. And so one of the things that we talk about in that unit is just the idea of what does it mean to be you? What are the factors that contribute to making me you? But you know how students sometimes fall back on those early structures. I'm tall, I'm short, I have blonde hair, I have blue eyes. And that's not really what your identity is about. The truth is that identity is a lot more than just what you look like, or if you're studious, or if you feel like you're smart, or who your parents are. It's the things that influence you. It's the situations that have happened in your life that really make you who you are. So I know in this book we're going to study Carlos, and we're going to decide what are the defining events that have happened in his life to make him who he is today. But I want them to also be able to do that when they're looking introspectively at themselves. What makes you who you are beyond just those superficial things? So I go to our school's yearbook, and I teach at the level 3 level. I have about 60 students, and so I find the sophomore and junior pages, because my level 3s tend to be juniors or seniors, and the yearbook is from last year, of course. I print copies of those pages and then just cut out the heads of my students. After I've done that, it does take a little bit of setup, and you wouldn't have to use their picture. You could just ask them to do this and draw their own picture, but I like to be creepy sometimes with them. So I blow up their pictures one at a time on the printer. One planning period, 48 minutes, and I can get everybody blown up and ready to go. And when they come into class, their picture is sitting waiting on their desk for them. And they see this picture of themselves, and now they have to not only describe themselves, but tell all the things that they like and don't like to do, their interests, their hobbies. Again, we hang these up on the wall, and this becomes the out-of-bounds vocabulary for the rest of the unit. You can tell me anything about what makes you who you are, but it can't be anything that you included on this poster when you started the unit. So it sort of forces them to grow by taking away the crutch that they use, or that they always hang on to, just those early Spanish 1, Spanish 2 words. So as you get ready for your next unit, try to think about a way that you could access their prior knowledge, because number one, accessing prior knowledge gives them some confidence that they already know something about the unit that you're about to study. And then take that prior knowledge and make it off limits. You already knew this part. I think it's great that you already knew this part. How can we build on it? What can we add to that that's going to give some really great value to the language that you're learning inside this unit? Thank you so much for joining me, for sharing with us in our teaching tips. Please don't miss our fall conference. It's coming up very soon. We'll be in Naperville at the NIU campus, and we're meeting October 26th and 27th. And you can get more details on our website at ICTFL.org, and we look forward to seeing you there. Have a really great week.